So, what if the key to renewing one of history's most significant ancient rituals wasn't really about politics or even faith, but about a single, unbreakable architectural rule? Today, we're digging into the bedrock requirement, this surprising engineering and legal puzzle that stands between a 3,000-year-old tradition and any chance of a modern revival. Literally millennia, the Passover offering, the Korban Pesach, was an absolute cornerstone of Jewish practice. And look, this wasn't just a tradition. It was a central commandment, something performed at the temple in Jerusalem. That powerful history, you can imagine, fuels a really powerful desire to see this ritual brought back today.
So, okay, if the will is there, what's stopping them? Now, sure, politics and logistics are huge hurdles, no doubt about it. But the real obstacle, the one we're talking about today, is something way more fundamental. It's this complex, technical, legal puzzle that's literally written into the blueprints of the temple itself.
To really get this, you have to understand that the location for the altar was never just a suggestion. It wasn't like, oh, just put it somewhere on this hill. No, according to the texts, it's a precise set of three-dimensional coordinates, a very specific point in space, laid out in a divine blueprint.
And that blueprint has a name, the Tavnit. The best way to think about it is like a sacred architectural plan from on high. This divine pattern dictates the exact layout, the exact specs for the temple, and all its key parts, including, of course, the sacrificial altar. And this isn't a plan you can just improvise on. Every single detail is seen as unchangeable, absolutely essential. So, if we're thinking of this as a 3D puzzle, right? Let's start with the first two dimensions, the X and Y coordinates. Where exactly on a map is this altar supposed to be? This is the hunt for its horizontal location.
And you know what? This part of the puzzle is pretty much solved. There's a tradition, passed down all the way since the time of King David, that points to a fixed, unchangeable spot inside the temple courtyard, or the Azara. And as you can see here, both modern scholarship and ancient sources place this spot right near the structure we know today as the Dome of the Chain. And that brings up the big question, right? If we have a really good idea of the horizontal coordinates, the X and the Y, then what's the big deal? What's the holdup? Well, it's because we haven't talked about the most critical dimension of all, the Z coordinate, the vertical one. Okay, this is it. This is the heart of our entire explainer. It's a rule that's ancient, it's non-negotiable, and it creates a massive, massive modern problem. It's the unbreakable bedrock rule, the law that governs the altar's vertical position. It all comes down to this one single line from the book of Exodus, "An altar of earth you shall make for me." Now, on the surface, that sounds pretty straightforward, but the way it's interpreted in Jewish law is incredibly specific, and it has these huge architectural consequences. See? According to the traditional interpretation, the oral law, altar of earth isn't about what the altar is made of, it's about what it's connected to. The law requires, it demands, that the altar has to be built in direct, unmediated contact with the original natural ground, the bedrock. You simply cannot build it on top of paving stones or on an arch or on layers of man-made fill. It has to touch the earth. And get this isn't some minor detail or a stringency that rabbis added later on. That means it's a law that's considered to come directly from the Torah itself. It's part of the core operating system, not just some app you can ignore. It's fundamental. And the rule here is totally black and white. There's no gray area. If the altar is built directly on natural bedrock, it's valid. It's kosher. If it's built on literally anything else, paving stones, fill, a support beam, it's invalid. It fails the command, and any sacrifice offered on it would be considered completely void. So how does this ancient law create such a huge, modern physical problem? Well, this is where the theory collides head-on with the reality on the ground today, and it reveals this critical vertical mismatch. And that mismatch has a number, about 6 cubits. We're talking something like 9 or 10 feet. To put that in perspective, just picture a one-story building. That is roughly the vertical distance between the current platform of the Temple Mount and the original bedrock where the altar has to be built. So how in the world did we get this gap? Well, basically, history built it, layer by layer. Way down at the bottom, you've got the original bedrock, the actual authentic floor of the ancient temple courtyard. Then, piled on top of that, you've got centuries of artificial fill, just rubble, debris from all the different construction and destruction cycles. And then, way up on top, you have the current paved level platform that we all see today. So the consequence here is just
Unavoidable. According to the legal analysis in our source, if you built an altar on the current surface, it would basically be floating, in a sense, 9 or 10 feet above its required foundation. It would be separated from the earth by all this man-made material, and that separation would make it and any sacrifice on it legally invalid. Period. Okay, so we've laid out this massive 6-qubit problem. The next question is obvious. What do you do about it? And this is where the analysis shifts from just identifying the problem to proposing what it sees as the only legitimate path forward. So what's the plan when the ground is literally in the wrong place? The analysis argues pretty strongly against any symbolic gestures or trying to find shortcuts. Instead, it points to a much more fundamental first step. First, let's talk about what doesn't work. You might think, hey, why not just do a simplified ritual right on the current surface? Well, it's a non-starter. As you can see, it fails on every single critical point. The base is invalid, the elevation is way too high, it doesn't have the required altar structure, and, this is interesting, being that high up would physically block the lines of sight needed for other essential temple rituals. And so, this brings us to the source's very direct and pretty challenging conclusion. The only way to fulfill the bedrock requirement is to physically get to the bedrock. The necessary first step, before you can even think about any ritual, is a systematic, careful excavation down through all those layers of history to expose the original floor of the temple courtyard. Which brings us to the final, really powerful conclusion from this analysis. The discussion, it argues, can't begin with the ritual knife. It has to begin with the archaeological spade. And, that leaves us with a pretty profound thought that goes way beyond just this one ritual. How do we engage with a past that isn't just a memory, but is physically buried right under our feet, just waiting to be rediscovered? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us.
Follow Yosef for more at mishnawalk.substack.com.